Are you doing okay? Are you feeling better?
This is Missy Martinez-Stone. She's the president and CEO of the Center for Client Safety, a nonprofit organization focused on helping women who've experienced mistreatment and harm within the abortion industry hold negligent practices accountable.
Somebody on the inside is like messing with the case. He tried to go to the medical board. He called the abortionist and the abortionist wouldn't talk to him. He was like, how do I submit a complaint to this? And they all did it incorrectly. And he said, nobody would take it seriously that this abortionist did severe, like it was so clear that there was medical negligence.
For decades, the pro-life movement has been fighting to see Roe v. Wade overturned. In June 2022, they finally saw this come to fruition. And while many people thought this would be the end of the fight against abortion, the numbers tell a different story. In the months following the Dobbs decision, abortion rates have actually gone up. But these rates haven't come as a surprise to those behind the scenes of the pro-life movement.
The pro-life movement needs to understand that this is a new season and a new day. And guess what? The other side understands that too.
I think that there's a lot of women that are scared. And so we may be seeing these abortion numbers increase because they're afraid that at some point they won't be able to obtain an abortion. What it says to me is that we have a lot of work to do.
Years before the decision of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health sent the issue of abortion back to the states, a group of leaders in the movement identified a devastating gap in pro-life efforts across the nation. In the last 50 years, unprecedented amounts of medical regulations were passed to limit the harm caused by the abortion industry, but the abundance of laws only had a marginal effect due to a severe lack of enforcement. What insiders began to refer to as the accountability gap amounts to this: laws only make a difference if they are enforced.
As we learned so painfully in the Godsey example, even though the laws were on the books for him to be evaluated and have some kind of exercise of oversight, that those were completely ignored.
Due to the highly political and divisive nature of the issue, governing bodies have often been reluctant to enforce even basic health and safety standards within abortion facilities. This has led to a largely unregulated and objectively unsafe industry that endangers women.
Filthy, stained medical equipment near an examination chair, trash near lab equipment and discarded in a storage room.
Unsterilized instruments, dirty linens, and expired medications. Just some of the findings after we combed through 5 years of state inspections at Georgia's abortion clinics.
While it's tempting to think these are exceptions within a carefully regulated industry, medical professionals and patients alike are quick to point out that the opposite is true.
What even people who are pro-choice are shocked to find out is that the abortion industry is largely unregulated, that in many states, nail salons, tanning salons, veterinary clinics face tougher regulation and tougher oversight than abortion clinics. Abortion clinics in many states have carte blanche to do whatever they want with no oversight whatsoever.
What happens is that these facilities are not regularly inspected, and so we hear on a fairly regular basis about surgical instruments not being sterilized properly, being used on one patient and then being used on another patient without being properly sterilized in between. This is abhorrent.
One of our doctors that's part of the Heartbeat International Network, he said that when he was an OB in school, he said those that were on the lowest end of the spectrum as far as grades and capabilities were the ones that tended to go into the abortion industry. I found that startling, but when I hear these examples of women describing kind of what kind of care that they've received, that does not surprise me.
I have been doing this sidewalk counseling. I remember one day, one of those days you really don't want to be in the pro-life movement. One of those days where you see things you don't want to see. Someone had taken the sewer cap off coming from the abortion clinic. And so the sewage from the abortion clinic was flowing out into the street. And it was literally bloody water with body tissue in it. I was able to collect myself, and you just kind of have to disassociate your feelings and just do your job. And we called the police. I was really angry at the police that day because they got there and back to the same old story. They were just kind of like, well, it is what it is, whatever. They just didn't care.
Experiences like these are not rare for sidewalk counselors. Over the course of conducting interviews, witnesses shared stories with us far too graphic to include in this video. Among them are reports of women running out of clinics while actively bleeding, and facilities refusing to report child sex trafficking.
I can't express how frustrating it is when we're seeing all these things that are disconcerting, but more than disconcerting, they're actually illegal. And here we've got all the proof and nobody's doing anything about it.
When attempting to report their experiences to the authorities, victims and their advocates often find themselves feeling invalidated or outright ignored by the very people meant to protect them.
In my experience, what would happen is women would want to report, they want to expose this, but then a little bit of time goes on and really what they want to do is just forget the whole experience. So it kind of gets swept underneath the rug.
The prevalence of stories like these and a recognition of the widening accountability gap is ultimately what led to the founding of the Center for Client Safety in 2020. Originally called Reprotection, the Center for Client Safety is a national organization addressing these problems head-on.
The Center for Client Safety focuses on investigating abortion facilities. What we hear from the local pro-life advocates most of the time is that they are breaking a lot of medical and ethical standards. So we take that information, we document it, we get the evidence necessary, and we take it to the appropriate authorities to help hold the abortion facilities accountable for the harm that they are causing women and children in their communities.
Researching rules and regulations, filing complaints, and chasing down bureaucrats to ensure they uphold the law, the Center for Client Safety has developed an expertise in relentlessly tending to the details and processes that make sure the justice system actually works.
Because we deal with so many government agencies, state agencies, there's so much red tape and bureaucratic mess that if I'm not getting a response from people, oftentimes I need to figure out who is above this person, who is above that person, and go up the chain until I can talk to someone who can give me an answer. The average, pro-lifer on the sidewalk who also has a job, they don't have time to do that. So we take that burden off them, get their intel. And that's also such an important part of why Center for Client Safety exists, because that is my full-time job.
Having established a highly proficient team and a proven process, the Center for Client Safety has found itself uniquely prepared for this moment.
This is the missing piece. This is what's needed in the pro-life movement, especially since Roe's been overturned and we're seeing the pro-abortion movement have legislative victory after legislative victory. This is something that can stop abortion in America, even in the most pro-abortion states.
Innovators in a new method of investigation and accountability, CCS has built a reputation for getting results, shutting down dangerous facilities and holding negligent abortionists accountable, all while standing in the gap for vulnerable women and children.
Our most recent victory was in Pensacola, Florida. The community has been reporting this facility for upwards of a decade.
There were 3 clients that needed major medical intervention in order to survive.
The fact that none of these women died is truly a miracle, because one of them had no pulse when they showed up at the emergency department. One of the EMTs in the record said that it was one of the worst cases he'd ever seen. It was the typical story of the sidewalk advocates and the local pro-life community raising the flag and saying there are issues here, and the agency refusing to get involved. And so when the Center for Client Safety came on the scene, immediately we identified the accountability gaps between the agencies.
The Center for Client Safety compiled first-hand witness testimonies, public records, and other corroborating evidence and got it into the right hands. Once a formal investigation was opened by the state medical board, the facility was immediately closed pending further review. 7 months later, authorities permanently closed the facility, suspended the abortionist's medical license for 1 year, and barred them from ever practicing OBGYN medicine again.
You know, in the past in the movement, the only tool we had was to go to media and hope that they do something with the story. What we were doing before was not getting actual results, and it was actually exploiting some of these women's really personal story. Now, we're getting actual results, and these women's stories are being protected, their privacy is being honored too.
Ensuring that intel is solid, actionable, and appropriately handled, CCS shepherds each case to its appropriate and just conclusions. Hailed as the missing link in the pro-life movement, the Center for Client Safety has become known for its focus on unity, empowering other important pro-life institutions to do what they do best. CCS bridges the accountability gap between the horrific violations discovered by local advocates while serving abortion-minded women and the agencies responsible for enforcement.
You know, it's so true that when Sidewalk advocates stand in front of these abortion or abortion referral facilities, they see weird things. What is so great is we have a place to take this information, experts who know national and local regulations that can notify these officials of these dangerous things that are going on that are hurting women and obviously killing children. We're so grateful because they are filling a huge need in the movement. Otherwise, we would have no place to take this information.
To have specialists like Missy and the team to jump in and be those specialists who know the questions to ask, who know how to follow up, who then of course are going to wrestle it to the ground to the best of their ability. That's what's so amazing about them. Meanwhile, the rest of us are trying to help the woman walk through that scenario that she's facing, and because she has her own tragedies and challenges, and the two things are connected, but they're not the same. That's where the power comes, is that the woman's getting help, and the things that need to be held accountable for who she was potentially wounded by are now being addressed. They're this little specialized unit. They're really like the Delta Force and really carrying that conviction that someone ought to be really holding them accountable.
With a caseload growing by the day, the Center for Client Safety finds its method and mission are more important than ever. Their team remains passionate about reaching past the numbers to the very real people caught in these awful situations. With the utmost discretion and professionalism, CCS is as thorough in their investigative methods as they are passionate about connecting the grassroots local advocates to the powers and processes they need to hold the abortion industry accountable. In a system filled with cracks, they are committed to making sure no one falls through.